Hello and welcome to this edition of This is Glendale. I'm Bet Chorus.
And I'm Joe Dubinsky. And Bet, can you believe this is our 10th edition?
Wow.
This is Glendale.
This has been such fun. I can't believe we've met 10 times. So
yes,
this will be number 10. Yeah.
So what did you do this month?
Oh, I had two wonderful interviews. The first was with Nancy Masenko at the Glendale Heritage Preservation Museum, and she gave me some information which you will obviously get to see about the big exhibit on the women's contribution of Glendale. Mm-hmm. And it's for women who have lived or were living 1855 to 2000, mm-hmm. and it's really it's going to be a fabulous exhibit, which will start in March.
I hear it's quite the undertaking.
It's huge, I'm told. It's probably the biggest that's ever been launched there.
Great.
And secondly, and I'm really excited about this as well, I began with the first of what I hope to be many interviews with artists who reside here in Glendale. Mm-hmm. Jodi Skowronek graciously allowed us to interview her in her studio, and there are so many things that you can learn about the intimacies and the difficulties of being an artist, which is as well as the joys.
Very cool.
And you? What did you work on?
Well, I had a lovely Saturday morning I spent at the Glendale Community Library with Jean Smith, interviewing her about Storytime. Oh. It was really a lot of fun. The kids had a really, really good time, so that was very enjoyable. And on the darker side, did you know about the infamous murder that occurred here in Glendale in 1882?
A murder?
A murder.
Really?
Yes.
Well,
yes.
I am very excited to learn about it. I wasn't aware of it before now.
And it remains one of the most famous cold cases in the area.
Well, this is very exciting.
Yes, it is. So?
Shall we?
Yeah, we shall.
Let's get going.
All right. Hi, I'm Joe Dubinsky for This is Glendale, and I'm at the Glendale Community Library at the Harry Whiting Brown Community Center to talk to Jean Smith about story time at the library. Hi, Jean.
Good morning.
So, Jean, tell me, when did the story time at the library get started?
In August of 2008. There was nothing in the library at that time, but we decided to go ahead and start Storytime.
So how did it get started?
Well, we asked Harry Whiting Brown if we could have this room. It had been a library years and years before, and with Hamilton County, and they closed at least 25 years before that, and a desire for a library in Glendale.
Very good. So when is it held and at what time?
Storytime's held on the third Saturday at 10:30.
Mm-hmm. And who comes? Can anybody come to the story time?
Any child is welcome that wants to come to Storytime from any community. It is not just a Glendale endeavor. It's for all surrounding communities. And we have people that come and volunteer that will have a specialty, like in science or playing the piano, and we welcome them.
So how are the books chosen?
The person that's the reader
mm-hmm.
gets to choose the books based on the topic of the month.
Okay.
And they choose what fits them.
Great. That sounds great. So who helps you with the program?
Well, right now, Mary Lofty is the main reader, the reader, and Bev Rickoff helps with the children, and Betsy Ben.
Great.
And those are the core of the group.
So if someone wanted to volunteer, how would they do that?
Well, they could call Betsy Ben, or they can call me, Jean Smith, at 708-5805.
Great. So today when I was watching Storytime, and as the kids were leaving, they were asking about cookies. Tell me about the cookies.
Yes. Well, we have a partnership with Jen at the bakery, and she offers us free cookies for those kids that read 5 books at home, and that they take them out of the library, go home, read them, their parent signs a sheet, we give them a little card, and they go down to the bakery and get a cookie.
That sounds great.
And we really appreciate Jen's help with that.
Well, I bet you do. Oh, if you have a child that would like to participate in Storytime at the library, remember, it's held the third Saturday of every month at 10:30. I'm Joe Dubinsky, and this is Glendale.
Hello, and welcome to this segment of This is Glendale. I'm Bet Chorus, and with me today is Nancy Masenko. Welcome, Nancy.
Thanks, Bet.
And we are here in the Glendale Heritage Preservation Museum to discuss something that's been banding about the village for quite some time, a really unusual, very special exhibit that you've been working on. Will you share some information with us?
Bet. This is the most magnificent enterprise that we've taken on in Glendale Heritage Preservation. But first, let me tell you, 2020, the year 2020, is the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote.
Hooray.
And across the country, there will be different celebrations, but here in Glendale, we're going to do it our way. And our way is to shine a light, to focus on 35 incredible women who changed our hearts, our lives, and our community in this museum.
How did you decide to set this up? I mean, what were the criteria that there are many, many fabulous women in the history, obviously, but how did you decide to organize it?
It's a good question, because it was tricky for us. How do we choose women among so many high achievers in this village? First, we set a timeline, and we said, let's look at between 1855 and 2000. That's a pretty broad space of time, but at least it gave us timeline parameters to work in. So we started to look at women who made incredible contributions in that time. And we're talking about suffragists and artists and educators. There's even a woman in this exhibit who was nominated for a Nobel Prize.
How did you possibly streamline it so that you could make something be logical and manageable?
It was hard. So we said, let's find the women who led action that inspired innovation and change, and who made significant impacts on society, not just in Glendale, but beyond, and who distinguished themselves in 9 categories: in arts, education, women's rights, public health, social welfare, commerce, community development, religion, and philanthropy. That's massive.
It is, but each one is so, I mean, one of those would be a terrific accomplishment. But
Absolutely.
I'm sure you're going to have many women who did many of those things.
We'll have 35 women featured in this museum space.
Oh, it's wonderful. So when does it start? I want to see it now.
It opens to the public on March 1, which is a Sunday. And the museum isn't typically open on Sunday, but for this exhibit, it's a perfect time to open. It's also the beginning, the first day of Women's History Month. So
This is obviously going to be a fabulous exhibit. Every one of you, please come. Male, female, young, old, come. Speaking of males, I have seen something about an honorary female. What is that all about?
something like this?
Yes.
Well, it's an honorary women pin. As we were planning the exhibit, a number of men said, how can we help? Or can we get involved? And so that startled us into thinking, well, hang on, how are we going to do this? And we decided that the best way we could do that, to bring men into this experience, was to make them honorary women. And it started out as a very fun idea, and it's now turned into an extraordinarily meaningful emblem for the men in the village who want to stand in solidarity with the women of this exhibit and the women of Glendale at large. So you'll see 40, 50 men walking around Glendale wearing these honorary women pins, and we're delighted.
That's a terrific idea. That's really special.
It's only Glendale.
Yeah,
only
exactly.
Glendale.
Thank you so much. Well, that is this segment of Glendale. This is Glendale. But first, I want to point something out. Nancy is actually one of the instigators of this whole This is Glendale segment. She's the brains behind and keeps Joe Dubinsky and me on task. So if you see her, either thank her or blame her for This is Glendale. Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And together, this is Glendale.
I'm Joe Dubinsky for This is Glendale, and I'm on Oak Avenue near the corner of Woodbine Avenue, where the most heinous crime in the history of Glendale took place on October 8, 1882. The murder of 39-year-old Arthur Wellington Ross. Arthur Ross was a well-respected resident of Glendale, described as unassuming and kind. He lived up the street here on Oak Avenue with his wife Caroline and their 2 children. At the time, there were no other houses between the tracks
and Mr. Ross's resident. Mr. Ross was also a prominent businessman in Cincinnati, co-owner of the coal merchant company Ross and Lyle. He was a treasurer of the Coal Dealers Exchange, and he was a commissioner of the Cincinnati Industrial Arts Exposition. The Cincinnati Industrial Arts Expositions were held between 1873 and 1888, and they showcased products made by Cincinnati business owners. After attending the close of the exposition, where his peers congratulated him for a successful event, and the Coal Dealers Exchange meeting, which was his normal schedule, Mr. Ross boarded the 11:30 train on the evening of October 7th. The train arrived at 12:17 on October 8th, where he departed the train. It was an accommodation for the train to slow down at Oak Avenue to let Mr. Ross jump off. At the behest of his friends, Mr. Ross had begun carrying a handgun on his walk home from departing the train. According to investigators who believe that more than one person was involved, they must have known Mr. Ross's schedule and knew that he was going to disembark the train at Oak Avenue. They may have even have been watching him. Waiting in the dark shadows here by the side of the road, they walked up behind Mr. Ross and hit him on the back of the head with a blunt instrument, killing him instantly. He still had the gun in his hand, and as he fell, they must have seen it. Not knowing he was dead, they struck him in the face repeatedly. The body was found 6:30 in the morning by the milkman, who passed by thinking this was a drunken person laying in the street, drove past without stopping. He drove down to the end of the Oak Avenue, where he stopped at the Farmers Hotel at the toll gate and reported what he'd seen. It wasn't long before neighbors started to come out, and they identified the body as that of Mr. Ross. He still had the handgun in his hand. His basket was on his left-hand side, contents strewn about. His eyeglasses were on the ground. Papers and letters were also strewn about. Missing was a silver watch, part of his watch chain, and his pocketbook. Authorities didn't think that professionals did the job because he still had $16, his diamond shirt stud, a gold ring, and his gold convention badge. People from around the area were brought in for questioning, but no arrests were made as there was never enough evidence to warrant an arrest. A reward of $5,000 was offered by the village council, and even the village of Hartwell and Wyoming offered $200 each. The story made the papers all over the country, and police were on the lookout for potential suspects. The most interesting one came from the October 24th edition of the Atlanta Constitution. A man by the name of Morrison was picked up for burglary. He was wanted in the state of Tennessee as well. Fearing that he would be extradited to Tennessee, he made a confession, providing a lot of the details about the murder. Investigators from Cincinnati came down to Atlanta to talk to him, and what they found was that Mr. Morrison had wrapped his burglary tools up in the October 9th edition of the Cincinnati Times-Star. They discounted his confession and thought that he was just trying to get out of going to Tennessee. No one was ever charged for the murder of Arthur Wellington Ross, and it remains today Glendale's most famous cold case. Thanks to Jill Bites for providing a lot of the information for this story. I'm Joe Dubinsky, and this is Glendale.
Welcome to this segment of This is Glendale. I'm Bet Chorus, and with me today is Jodi Skowronek. We are in her beautiful art studio, and Jodi is the first of several Glendale artists that I will be interviewing, sharing the very talented people that are our neighbors. Jodi, this is great. Thank you for being number one.
Well, I'm happy to do it, and
Okay.
very proud, actually.
As you should be. I'm wondering, when did you know you were an artist?
I just grew into it. Came to, from our very artistic family. All my brothers and sisters partake in some manner of creativity, and my dad and mom both were very creative. So it was just second nature.
So what kind of art did you do when you were young?
I probably just played. We played in the woods, we created environments in the woods, we then had plays in the environments that we made in the woods.
Terrific.
So, I can't say that I did a lot of drawing or painting, certainly not when I was a little kid.
Yeah.
That didn't really begin until I really got into high school.
Okay, and then how did that evolve?
And just because I just took art because it was a natural thing to do and started making art in a more professional way.
So when you left high school and were in college, what path were you on at that point?
Well, I went to a liberal arts college, and of course I took art. But then I was introduced to the Art Institute in Chicago.
Wow.
And beat a path there as quickly as possible.
I
and
guess.
so I transferred after my sophomore year and completed another 4 years at the Art Institute.
You told me once when you were giving me a tour of your garden that you did this huge metal installation in Chicago. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was part of a project that Mayor Daley asked the Art Institute if we could put up an installation. And so there were like 4 of us, and it was summer school. And we put up a big installation, each of us making our own. And then, because it was the weekend of the National Convention in 1967, they had to be taken down.
Oh, all that hard work.
All that hard work of putting them up.
Right, and tell me what it was like being a woman and doing that kind of, working with steel and high structural things.
Actually, it wasn't out of place at the Institute, but one of the things that was really funny looking back, I had to get a pair of what we would call, at that time, combat boots. There was no place to buy them.
That would fit for women's feet.
For a woman,
Yeah.
yes. The only thing I could do was go to the Boy Scouts store
That's
and
funny.
buy hiking boots.
Okay, so let's move forward a little bit. And you are now here in Glendale and have been putting your art on a hiatus, rearing 5 children.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Right.
That sort of comes without question.
Right, but then whenever you get them out of the nest and you're back to working on your own art, a little bit in your garage, in your basement, I mean, what prompted you to bite the bullet and build this studio?
Well, frankly, I was just standing in my little studio down there, right, next door, the basement of the house, and I looked out and thought, this is the place. We could just put up a beautiful building right there. I marched right up the stairs. Larry was in the kitchen and said, Larry,
Okay.
it's time to do this.
And the decision to buy a kiln, which is an expensive proposition, was generated because of your new materials that you had begun to work with?
Yeah, I, with a friend of mine, Calista Bachenstedt, we went to Marlene Shane's studio and fooling around with clay and whatever, and I started making sculpture out of it. And that's was really fun, and that was the beginning of my love of clay.
So then your clay started taking on the monumental proportions that you did earlier, and you had to figure out how to build things. Can you want to talk a little bit about some of the process of these that are here?
Yeah,
we can see?
Well, first of all, everything has to be hollow. So, and you can't have any air holes in the clay. So I simply learned how to build bit by bit by bit by bit. And it's tedious, but that's what you have to do.
Right. So Jodi, do you do any commission work?
Well, actually, I have a commission right now from Tender Mercies.
Well, show me.
I'd love to.
Great. So this is going where?
This is going in a garden, outdoor garden at a new building that Tender Mercies is opening. And this is one of 3 pieces, and it is a rolling stone. So my concept was journey.
Okay.
And it turns out that the word journey is part of their philosophy.
Terrific.
So they were real excited about that.
So
and I did not know that.
So the 3 stones will give the impression of rolling stones.
Well,
Are they
that's
kind of
my-
partially
yeah.
in the ground or something? You said?
No, there'll be plants around it.
Oh,
and,
plantings. Yeah, okay.
You know, the footings in the ground down 4 feet, and
That's
it's very complicated.
That's terrific.
That's one of the things about making sculpture. It's solving problems. Problems in the construction, problems in the installation, problems in the bases. It's very exciting. So if you feel the clay, you can feel how cold it is. It's drying, and it's hollow. So
It's so sensuous, so earthy.
it's very earthy.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
that's
really nice.
true. That's true.
And there was
Over
another
here,
piece?
yeah, this is another piece. This is going to Michigan, and it is a fossil. And so you've got ancient history. That's the name of it. On this side, this is an Indian chief and hill town.
Jodi, I see your big bulk of clay here. Why don't you explain the process for building these hollowed out?
Yes, exactly. So I get the clay and I turn it into these building blocks, and I simply build up piece by piece by piece, creating the piece all the way around at the same time.
Jodi, I can't begin to thank you enough for agreeing to be #1 in the artist interview. You did a wonderful job. I love your studio and all the work that you've done, and I'm excited to have shared it with the village of Glendale. And as we close, this is Glendale.
Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode of This is Glendale. And remember, if you have an interesting story that you'd like us to cover, drop us an email at thisisglendale@gmail.com.
We encourage you. We love your ideas.
Absolutely.
Gives us inspiration. Well, that's it. Thank you for watching This is Glendale. I'm Beth Porras.
I'm Joe Dubinsky, and
this is Glendale.